We take on the darkness, stare down deceit. Murder in the headlines, justice in the beat. From cold case whispers to killers in disguise, we rip off the mask, expose all the lies. Facts like bullets we load and deliver. Truth cuts deep like a blade in a river. Corruption shakes when the mic goes live. We dig where others won't survive. Games rolling through the smoke. Truth hits hard, no time for a joke. Deceit, murder, we name every name. No restraint, no shame, just flame. Locked on the case, we investigate.
This is 12 Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
You'll ever need 12 Gauge Investigate. We make them bleed. No games, no censors, just truth. Justice is loud, and we're the sound. This is 12 Gauge Investigative.
All right. Welcome. Happy Saturday again. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. You know, earlier I did a live and we were talking about the documents, and I thought, you know what? I really need to go check them out myself to go see exactly what it's all about. So I thought that I'd ask in my Discord if somebody could drop the link, and of course, you ask and you shall receive. So let's go ahead and start in on these documents and see exactly what we can see on this channel versus what other channels perceive about these documents. I'm not going to speed through them. I'm going to really look at them and allow you to look at them, not look at them in the way that I want to see them, but in the way that I know that you guys would probably want to see them as well. Let me go ahead and get a different media slot for that, because for some reason that move the layer back. This one sucks for some reason. Let me know if y'all can see that as soon as I finish doing this. All right. If I need to make it bigger and make myself smaller, or if I need to go this direction, I will do that. I think that'll probably be the best direction to go. Let me just do one, because I really don't plan on having a co-host up here. I don't really do that much anymore. So let's go on with it. If you're here for the first time, please jump in. Feel free to do so. What the hell is up with this? Why won't it let me freaking move my spot? You know, it's really pissing me off. Hope that you hang in there for a second, because I'm trying to change this crap. And if you're in Discord texting me, shame on you. All right, I guess we're going to have to go with that. Okay. Well, let's just look at this. If you've already gone over it, that's fine. I'm just on here for my own benefit, because I don't like to listen to other people go over stuff that I could look at myself and, you know, try to get some kind of understanding. If you want to hop in the chat, feel free to. If not, enjoy the live from the side. Obviously, this says an evidence admission receipt. As we've talked about in the past, the receipts are utilized for what information that you're going to obtain and go over in the document. So this was from Dustin Blaker, and obviously it was over for Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. And also it gave you the K-bar sheath with the logo and the processing avenues about it. So we'll continue to go down. I just don't want to go and jump into the most relevant portion because there's a lot of it. I did a little bit on the sheath last night and this morning, but you know what? If you don't get to look at the whole thing, what the use? You know what I mean? What's the use if you're just going to skip around? So we'll just keep going. This is some more receipts. And these are the receipts of what they identified, which is the swab of the front strap, the swab of the blood collected from the F2 bedroom floor, the blood swab taken from the F3 bedroom floor, the DNA blood card collected from the autopsy, the right nail clipping from the autopsy, the left nail clipping from the autopsy, the DNA blood card from the autopsy, and the right hand nail clippings from the autopsy, left hand nail clippings from the autopsy, the DNA blood card, the right hand nail clippings, left hand nail clipping, DNA blood card from the autopsy. And this is the type of the exam requested with the general biology screen. So it continues on. Left hand nail clippings, buccal swab from redacted, the DNA swab from the redacted, DNA swab from redacted, and the general biology screen. So once again, these were also suspects and subjects that were having these kind of things done to them as well. So the suspect was probably Brian Koberger. The subjects were probably, I would say, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. So this is some more submission receipts. The blood swab from the above stairwell, blood swab from upper floor banister, major crime print from victim Ethan Chapin's from the autopsy, major crime print for victim Xana Kernodle from the autopsy, major crime print from Madison Mogan, the same for Kaylee Gonsalves, DNA swab to possible finger, hand, and face marks from the outside south kitchen window. And we have seen that there had been handprints that we were privileged to see of those photographs. So they did DNA swabs of that fingerprint and the face marks from the outside of the kitchen window. If you remember that correctly, that was the handprint that was being shown from the inside and the fingerprint that were on the outside and the face print. The stain swab from the bottom handrail, the stair between floor 1 and floor 2. The swabs of stains on top of the edge of a half wall, which was floor number 2. So they did a lot of swabs. They did latent lift cards taken from the exterior south kitchen window. Of course, when you're taking latent prints, we have found out that this can be done by tape. It could be done by glue. It could be done in different variations. Dusting is the most common, but those are the other ways that you can lift those prints. Obviously, if they are on wood or plastic or concrete, you can use different chemicals to lift those prints off those surfaces. So this continues to tell you what the receipt of this next round of stuff that they're looking at. A cigarette butt found at the bottom of the entryway stair next to where the subject's right foot was. Cigarette butt found in right corner where walkway meets the bottom stair, next to where the subject's foot was. So that's interesting. Interesting, because we heard about that cigarette butt. And we get another receipt for some more different information. The blood swab from the entry hallway wall and the kitchen wall. The blood swab, and a glove. So as I've told you multitudes of times on my channel, very early on, that there was going to be a lot of stuff being tested. And many people only thought there was going to be only certain evidence that they were looking for. There was not a lot of blood. There was this and that and the other. You don't test for what's not there. You test as in what you find. So they found certain things in that home that could have been directly linked to the murder. They had to figure it out. Was this linked to the murder, or was this just casual everyday life and this was left behind on another day? So here's another receipt for those four. And this is the buccal swab. Obviously, these are from different people, or these could have been from the three people that gave the buccal swabs and the DNA swab from the cigarette butt that they found. If you remember that, there was buccal swab, 3 different buccal swabs given, and a DNA swab from a cigarette butt. I believe that that's what these are about. More receipts. And this is from Tim Smaldridge, which delivered it. And this is blank. And this only has Brian's name, Koberger, as a suspect. And it has another suspect up here, which is interesting because this person was probably a suspect very early on, before Brian was even thought of, because before the 21st of November, they had no clue Brian existed, according to the documents that we have read and seen. And there's a lot of other subjects that the names are redacted that were probably had certain tests ran on them as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 subjects and 2 suspects. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I bet you 21, 22, 23, and 24. I bet you that those 24 subjects were probably the 24 people that we heard their interviews in the document that we received. So they were probably interviewed and had a buccal swab from each of them and a swab from Mr. Koberger. He had a buccal swab also, so I'm sure they had both swabs done on a lot of these individuals. Because this doesn't say from autopsy. Those other ones said from autopsy, so you can understand the difference. This says 2 swabs from certain individual and buccal swabs from redacted. And I know this is not the most exciting thing, but you know what? What else you got to do right now than spend some time with me? Let me give a little background music. That way it cannot be as methodical as I'm making it right here. Let's see. Can we do this one? Let's see the daydreaming one. Oh, I gotta delete one. Got too many up here. So do you understand what I'm talking about at this point? Dang. Okay, I gotta delete another one. I'll delete a couple. Let's see what the daydreaming. Still wants me to delete. Y'all understand what I'm talking about? Because if you don't, that there is a problem, because that's part of the reason there's so much issues with all that's going on in this case. Because if people don't understand it, then they take people as experts that really do not have a clue what they're talking about. And that is not a diss toward anybody. They do the best they can, I'm sure, but they don't know what they don't know. And guessing does not make it factual. Let's see what this daydreaming is. I don't know. I don't know if I like that sound. Let's choose another one. That reminds me of like something else. Let's see. Let's go with that one. I can dig that. Anything that's not deathly silent, you know what I mean? So we'll go with that one. At least gives you a kind of beat in the background. So this is from Dustin Blaker. And once again, suspects, subject, subject, subject. All these are subjects. And that was the receipt for whatever they did with them, which is not visible. Once again, they were doing the investigation with these individuals, and they did a lift from the kitchen window. They did a second lift from the kitchen window. We weren't prevalent to see those photos. There was a third lift from the kitchen window, and they were processing these only. There was a lift from the front door lock. There was a lift from the kitchen sliding glass door. And there was a buccal swab from redacted. This was the general biology screen. So there's a buccal swab from this person, another person, another person, another person, another person, another person, and two more people. There was an empty beer can found on the stairs. We saw that in not only the cam footage, but we saw that in the pictures that we were given as well, correct? There was a backpack found in the living room. You remember that black backpack that was full of beer cans? We didn't know it was full of beer cans, but this tells us it was full of beer cans. And also test for DNA, of course. There was an empty beer can found on the vanity, and we did see that one as well. Second empty beer can found on the vanity. And these were general biology screens, processing only. So nothing special for those beer cans, because in reality, would you have thought that Brian would have been drinking beer and crumpled it up and threw it on the stairwell? Not probable at all. So once again, another receipt for these individuals. Blue powder found on desk in the bedroom, unmeasured. Controlled substance analysis. So this was done due to not knowing the identification of this blue powder. And many people have stated, never been stated by the police or anywhere what the blue powder was, but many people assume that it was crushed up Adderall. We don't know one way or the other, but many people seem to believe that that's what that was. So if that's what that was, they may have found the toxicology report on that substance and saw exactly what was the blue powder. Like I said, it's a beautiful thing that we have not only photos, but we have other documents that coincide with what I'm talking about right now. And let me know if that music gets on your nerves. I will definitely change it. Okay. Because I don't know if I can take it for a long period of time, but right now it's not too deafening. I know that other one is annoying as hell. It is very annoying. See what the rock one is. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's go with that one. That other one was getting kind of monotonous. Okay, so here's another receipt for submission based on the evidence that they found. Blood swab from north wall stairwell already tested positive for blood. Okay, as we all know, just because it tests positive for blood doesn't necessarily mean we know whose blood that was. And if people tell you different, then they're lying to you. Plain and simple. If they tell you you can tell whose blood that is, they're lying to you. You can tell the DNA from the blood, but you know, they're not able to tell you whose blood that is until they view the DNA from it. The blood swab from half the wall already tested positive for blood. This could have been cast off, or it could have been anything of that sort. The blood swab from the half wall already tested for blood. The blood swab from the second floor study table already tested positive for blood. Okay, this is interesting right here. The blood swab from the second floor study table already tested positive for blood. So I'm trying to think of what would be identified as a study table. Would it have been that little table that, as you round the corner, off that blind corner that had those plants and stuff, right there under that picture? Would that have been the study table? Possibly. Blood swab from the second floor outside of the bedroom door already tested positive for blood. So those people that say that there was too much blood and there was no evidence in that blood whatsoever, this should beg to differ. How are these things made up if they're in a legal document? You might not believe it, but it is what it is. Blood swab from the smear on the living room table already tested positive for blood. So there was a smear on the living room table. So if my mind points me in the right direction, there was the table, the big old beer pong table, and then there was a little bitty table underneath the frames, the photo frames there on the wall, and then alongside that was the good vibe sign. So unless that living room table right there, as you walk through the doorway, off to the left right there with all the stuff where they looked into the drawer and there was various amounts of stuff there, was there a blood swab on a smear on that living room table? And who would have smeared that on there? The blood swab from the edge of the third floor door already tested positive for blood. So I believe that a lot of people get it confused, as in when the coroner said there was blood everywhere, or there was the most blood that you'd ever seen. Does that necessarily mean that blood was dripping off everything? Of course not. But in many people's mindset, they believe that if it's not that way in the visual component, then there was no blood. You know what I mean? There was no blood. So you gotta take it for what it is. So the blood swab from the floor stain inside the doorway west bedroom Marker R already tested for blood. Okay, this is on this inside doorway, west bedroom. So west would have been Rosanna and Ethan's room. Marker R already tested positive for blood. Because we did see spots on that wooden floor in their bedroom with the photo that we were given that time. There was probably 4 drops of blood. I wonder if that's what they're talking about. And here is another receipt. This says evidence submission receipt. So this means the evidence that I'm talking about was submitted, and this is the receipt for it. So if people talk about these documents in a different way, these right here, they don't know what they're talking about. These are the receipts for the evidence that not only was collected, but the evidence that was taken from any of these individuals that are listed above. FBI number 4, 2 band-aids from blank in Blakesley, Pennsylvania. 2 band-aids. Okay. FBI number 11, a straw from blank in Blakesley, Pennsylvania. FBI evidence marker number 17, 2 pink earplugs from Blakesley, Pennsylvania. FBI number 19, lollipop sticks and wrappers from Blakesley, Pennsylvania. FBI marker number 24, nail clippings or nail clippers from so-and-so, Blakesley, Pennsylvania. FBI evidence marker number 26, 8 earplugs from redacted, Blakesley, Pennsylvania. FBI marker 34, used napkins from, I would say this was probably Brian. I was a guessing man, but I could be wrong. FBI number 36, flossers from redacted, Blakesley, Pennsylvania. I'm going to quit saying Blakesley. Y'all can read. Number 37, used Q-tips. Number 38, Dunkin' Donut cup and lid. So this was probably from the trash can stuff that they found. Number 41, a straw. Number 44, flossers. Number 45, Q-tips. Number 46, lollipop stick. Number 48, Dunkin' Donut cup with the lid. Number 50, popsicle sticks. Number 56, water bottles and caps. Number 61, water bottle. So that's some evidence right there. You know, to say that, yeah, they have chain of custody and evidence log receipts. No way. Hey, Firefly and Chloe, thank you for being here. So, imagine if you're framing somebody, how much work it would be to put this story together by putting all this evidence and attach it to one person based on what we're going over right now. Major crime prints for, I would say, Brian Kohberger. Possible hair found inside shower drain tested positive for presumption of blood. ISP marker number 9. So, you know, there's a lot of us that have been saying from the very beginning they weren't talking on everything that they found. And there was people saying, well, there's no way that they found anything that would tie him to this crime. Even if all this stuff did turn out to be positive for Brian Kohberger's DNA, and one day they released that, it would have been circumstantial evidence. because it was not found at the crime scene. So anything found outside the crime scene would have been circumstantial evidence. So let's move on. Dark red counter swab tested positive for the presumption of blood. Marker A. So let me pause for a minute as well. You know, the test, as we know, Brian was a clean freak, okay, supposedly. I don't agree with that, but supposedly he was everybody assumes he was a OCD clean freak. I don't see that. He dressed too frumpy for that to be. But let me tell you that when they're testing for blood, okay, if you clean up a surface and blood has been there, the test is testing for the iron in the blood. Some chemicals do have chemicals that can test positive or presumption for a mixture of a cleanup, and that's how they can tell. But you can always see, like it says, the presumption of blood and what we're talking about here. Okay, the cutting of reddish brown stain on uncased pillow tested positive for the presumption of blood. ISP marker B. So the reddish brown thing, could that have been a shaving issue with him? Anything possible? But why would he still have that? You know, once again, I'm not talking about anybody's channel or anybody in particular, but think about this a minute. From the serial killers and killers that you've seen in the past and heard of, they've always kept souvenirs, right? So how is it that Brian would not have been the exception to the rule? Top of the mattress pad, which we saw. Bottom of the mattress pad, the seat cover and cushion from the suspect's vehicle, the back seat collected from suspect vehicle, section of the headliner near the visor collected from the suspect vehicle, seatbelt boot collected from the suspect vehicle, the buccal swab collected from suspect, the Latah gel. Major crime prints from, we'll see. See, these are the receipts and the evidence, photos, and everything else. The laboratory results and everything is coming up next. So this is how an investigation works, okay? You have to have a receipt for what you collect. And before you collect evidence, you must have a search warrant. And before you have a search warrant, you must have probable cause to gain that search warrant. So individuals that are saying you could just show this to the judge or show this to Ann, and this would be enough to overturn his plea bargain, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, and none of it works that way. There's procedures in place when you're gathering evidence, and this is how it goes. You have to have receipts. And once this evidence was collected, they had a chain of custody form. Whether they were on bags, whether in little baggies, whether, they had a sign in, sign out sheet, all that was attached to the evidence. You cannot hold any of this evidence that they find without writing down that you held it, what date it was from time to time that you returned it back. So to say that there's so many people that had their hands on it and the chain of custody was messed up, it's ridiculous to even think that way. This is a good one right here. It says also Ann literally has had all this information for years. Exactly. Yet she chose not to get any of it suppressed, because the evidence obviously was pointing stronger in the direction that Brian was guilty, then a jury would have found him not guilty and possibly would have put him to death. FBI number 18, swab of gas and brake pedal removed from the suspect's vehicle, 70 swab for lab submission. There was no exam requested from all this. FBI number 21, swab of gear shift removed from this person's Brian Koberger, 70 swabs for lab admission. No exam requested. FBI number 36, swab of seatbelt buckle removed from 23M0069 for lab submission. None of these that I'm reading out were exam requested. Number 28, swab the gas and trunk release, 70 swabs worth for lab submission. Number 23, swab of radio controls removed from 70 swabs for lab submission. Swabs of stains on objects in the west bedroom on floor number 2, markers T and U. And we've seen that in photos. You know, we've seen these letters T and U in photos. Swab of stain on the inner edge of the east bedroom door on floor number 3, marker X. Submitted swab of stain on the trash can in the west bedroom. Submitted swab of stain on a chair in the west bedroom. So these were in Xana's room. If you don't know which the west bedroom is. DNA extracts from item 125.1, 125.2, and 126. So for there not being any evidence, look at all this stuff that I've read out so far. There's no evidence whatsoever. You take the planted knife sheath and the dude's going to walk. That's what we heard for so many years. Although Telebite, they're not going to say nothing. They're not going to show a damn thing. Well, this kind of tells a little different story. Elimination prints from so-and-so. Elimination prints from so-and-so. That might have been from Brian. We never know. Because his is the only name that is not redacted on these lists. So, process of elimination tells you, well, on this one it's redacted. So we don't know who that elimination prints were from. But on this one, his name is not redacted. So therefore, chances are that this evidence right here that we're about to read has everything to do with him because this is his vehicle stuff. Turn signal assembly removed from the suspect vehicle by ISP Detective Talbot. Gear shift knob and boot removed from the suspect vehicle by the same person. And they did a general biology screen. And seeing that Brian's the only one not redacted, I would like to say that this is probably having to do with him. The pink blanket with red hearts was tested presumptive positive for proteins using blue star area that illuminated is indicated with a Sharpie. Please test for blood. So the pink blanket, who do we know that loved pink? This one had a red heart and it tested for proteins using the blue star area that luminous is indicated by a Sharpie. So they sent that for a general biology screen. A green and pink jacket was tested presumptive positive for proteins, which were luminous using blue star area with luminous was front zipper. Please test for blood. 2 exemplars BTN comparison only. I like it when people read these and they put their own understanding of what things are. Hey PKC. They're like, yeah, that's what that means. BTN. 3 exemplars of this. I'm not afraid to say I don't know what BTN is, and I don't need everybody in the room to tell me what it is so that I can say it. I totally wiped out my other laptop. I went to click the link of this website, and it totally shot a virus or something into my laptop that I usually use. So I'm having to use the old device, and it seems to be working fine. So I have to buy me another damn laptop. Item 913, item 918, comparison only. So as I've told you before, the police they don't go looking for a suspect, but they go eliminating people from being a suspect. And until you get that in your mindset, you're never going to understand that they pinpointed Brian instantly, because they did not. They were interviewing all these people associated with the roommates first, the inner circle. They were eliminating them by interviewing them. Every interview that you've seen, even the DoorDash driver, she was eliminated from being a suspect based on the questions that were being asked of her. She was not interrogated, but she was eliminated from being a suspect in that regard. So the police do not go looking for suspects. That's why it's so hilarious at times when people get in these chats and they're like, yeah, they need to take that guy down and interrogate him. That's not how it works. You have a certain thing called rights. You cannot just be plucked off the street by assumption, taken down to the station, and forced into an interrogation. That's not how the criminal justice system works. But yet, on the same token, those same individuals that are screaming for other people to be plucked off the street and interrogated have every issue under the sun on the way that Brian was implicated into this crime sequence based on the evidence that we're seeing up here on the screen. It doesn't make sense in that retrospect, because how can you scream for one to be plucked off the street and implicated into a crime, or other people implicated, but when they have somebody in custody, you're screaming up and down foul play, corruption, planting, no evidence, no white Elantra, no this, no that. You're screaming all the anti-police rhetoric, but yet when it comes to everybody else, it's okay for them to be guilty until they're presumed innocent. But there's been so many people that have called people names in regards to them wanting to say that based on the evidence, it shows more likely than not that this individual did it. And we were even given names for that. It's interesting. People's understanding of Constitution law is frightening. I know I have specialized knowledge, so I'm not trying to sound like an ass, but like, if people don't know what they're talking about, yeah. I'm not trying to sound like an ass either. I'm just saying that, you shouldn't speak on what you don't understand or know. You really shouldn't. It's okay to analyze. I get that. I get the analyzing. I get the question, trying to understand it. I get that. Was a balaclava. All right. I get that. There's nothing wrong with questioning. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you assume that this person was more of a suspect than the person that they got in custody, You have to ask yourself, what evidence do you have to to presume that? Has there been any evidence or any DNA that linked any of the surviving roommates to any of the autopsies, swabs? Was their DNA on there? Because how could they have killed them if their DNA wasn't on the bodies? Oh, they cleaned them. 12 gauge. They cleaned everything. Obviously, Brian cleaned a lot too, and they still found a lot that we're going to see later on that he was unable to get rid of. He wasn't that smart, guys. I don't know why you put this man on a pedestal. He was not that smart. Let's continue on. I need to shut up with my rhetoric and just keep to the facts. And here we go. It's a chain of custody report. Once again, chain of custody is dated as such, and it tells you the time, usually that they look at it, and the time that they put it back into the evidence locker or whatever. So this tells you the custody of the lab staff, the person who had it, and his entry, SMA. And we've seen his initials on the photos. So this is the agency case number. This is the K-bar sheath with the USMC logo. And these are the people that, the time that they looked at this, where it was at, and who did it, or where it was, who was the person, and their initials. So that's the same person, Shannon Arredondo. And then it goes on down where it was, the evidence storage, evidence locker, a different set of initials. A date, 11/19, evidence stored, this is where it was, and where it went to, the evidence locker initials. So to say that there was not a chain of custody, or that the chain of custody was contaminated, that is false as well. So this goes right along, back and forth, back and forth. Different names, initials, who entered their names, what time it was, where it went to. I don't know about you, but that looks pretty damn detailed. So if you've never seen a chain of custody, you wouldn't understand that that's really how it looks. And this is just one piece of evidence right here. The K-bar knife sheath. Look at all those people that actually looked at that. All these people had a conspiracy in planting blood on that sheath, or reading blood on the sheath, planted by, I just can't even imagine it, so I can't even say it. It wasn't planted. The reason that sheath didn't look all bloody like it would have looked at the day that they found it, but because that blood soaked into the leather. And did they wipe a lot of it off? Possibly. They swabbed it, I'm sure. They collected it in vials. All that good stuff. So why would you need a sheath that you're delivering to a crime lab by hand, soaked in the victim's blood? They don't photograph any of the evidence soaked in blood. So to think that, you're an idiot. Been watching too many horror movies. They don't photograph evidence with the blood still on it. Even in the Ellen Greenberg case, there was a little traces of blood on that knife, but it was cleaned off pretty much because it came out of her chest. So to think that that knife sheath was too pristine, that it had to be cleaned or fabricated, once again, that's a delusion of your own grandeur. And here is the chain of custody for this knife sheath. And it ended on 12/16. Courier released to submitting agency, VIA agency courier, KSF. At one point, this had to go to Othram. You know, it was sealed. They sealed it en route to the Spokane crime lab, I'm sure, to not only get other DNA on it, but to keep from contaminating that object. It's probably in a Ziploc baggie or something, hand delivered, as they've said multitudes of times. And there is the chain of custody once it was hand delivered. These are for the other evidence, though. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me go back just a little bit. These are the swabs for everything that we have been talking about. There was the sheath. Here's the chain of custody for the swab of the front strap. This is the chain of custody for the swab of the edges of the handle portion. This is the swab of edges on the blade portion. This is the swab of the stains on the back. This is the swabs of the inside surface of the blade portion. This is the left hand nail clippings from the autopsy. So chances are this would have either been from one of the victims. Doesn't really say. We do know that their hands were bagged before they left the residence. This is the swab of the left fingernail clippings from Xana Kernodle. Dark red counter swab tested positive, presumptive for blood. ISP marker A. So this is the chain of custody for all that evidence. The people who handled it. You know what people think? They think the detective, what's his name? The bald-headed one. What's his name? Detective, God, I can't think of it. The bald-headed one. The one that was the lead investigator. Well, they think that he was the one that was testing all this stuff. In their mind, they think that he was in control of all this testing because they go at him like he's the one that was in charge of all this testing, all this chain of custody stuff. Yes, Payne. They go at him and all the other officers like they were in charge of testing all this stuff, and they weren't. There were so many people involved. So to presume that there's only one person doing all this testing and to slander them every chance you get as if they're liars, how would you know? Like, let me give you an example. If you were called to court today and you were on this case and they were asking you, hey, the stain on the cutting from the uncased pillow, can you tell me exactly what kind of stain that was? And do you know who has that testing information, where it went? Look at all these people that touched that. How would this man be able to know all that? How would he be able to know all that? That's why the PCA was written by multitudes of people. It was a working document. The suspected biostain bedding, top of the mattress pad, ISP marker C. Look at all these people that had influence over testing that. But still, we want to be told that only certain people were able to see this evidence, and they planted it, they put it there, they brought a new knife sheath and they dropped it at Spokane, and then while they was at Spokane, they dripped Brian blood on it or his DNA. Which how would they have gotten his DNA? How would they have gotten his skin cells? How would they have gotten any DNA from Brian at that point? They didn't even know Brian existed. Bottom of the mattress pad, ISP marker C. Different people, same people's initials, different people viewing this evidence. Chat, is what I'm saying making sense, or am I sounding as crazy as some of these people I'm talking about? The suspected biostain on the bedding is a stain A on the bottom portion of the mattress protector. And we've heard about this evidence, but people don't want to believe that it's true that this evidence actually had anything on it, because Anne did not ever release that in court. She made bold statements such as, there was no connection found between Brian and the roommate at his apartment or in the car. Okay. But she didn't say that they found blood. She just said there was no connection. So that made people think, oh, there was no blood, no DNA, no nothing, there was no connection. Okay. Because at that point it was gagged, right? We didn't know better. We were told there was no connection, so there was no blood, no DNA, so therefore, I haven't gotten that far, Firefly, but if I'm wrong, I will retract that for sure. She says, doesn't one of these documents list him as a suspect on December 5th? If I see that, I will definitely redact my statement, okay? But think about what I just said as far as her statement regarding there was no connection. Well, that's technically not a lie, but it's technically not true either, since they found blood on these items. Just because you don't know whose blood it was, technically not a lie, I guess. But to make him sound that innocent, but yet not to have any motion to suppress any of this evidence that they found, it doesn't set right with me. Stain C on the bottom portion of the mattress protector. And I've read this already, so if you're late coming in, I've already read this stuff and what they found on this evidence. So this is the seat cover and the cushion from the suspect vehicle. Once again, these are the people that were looking at that evidence, swabbing it, fingerprinting it, all the stuff they have to do the forensic portion of it. Cutting from the bottom seat cushion. These individuals had the authority to do so. The seat back collected from the suspect vehicle. Once again, this shows you a very detailed chain of custody report. Trace material from the back seat of the cushion. It was tested more than once. That's the thing that I want you to know. All this stuff was just not tested one time, and then they said, okay, it's a fact. That's not how science works. They don't just test it one time. So, oh, it's a fact. Brian's guilty. Let's just rush it over and let's just put the nail in the coffin. The suspect biostain, the swab, miscellaneous items. Section of the headliner near the visor, collected from suspect vehicle. It keeps going on and on. The seat belt boot, the collected from the suspect vehicle. And they said they did tear that car apart. A buccal swab collected from the suspect in the Latah jail. And look how many people had involvement with that buccal swab. A lot of people. Major crime prints from the suspect. Look at all those people that had business on that. DNA blood card. There's a multitude of people, and it tested multitudes of times from different areas. DNA extracts from 72 through 78, 10.1, 103.1, 103.2, 103.3, and 108. This is a very thorough job. Very thorough. I wonder if this is some of the discovery that she received late. The swabs of miscellaneous items, floor mat from the floor of the suspect vehicle. I mean, you would expect a thoroughness like this to be done in a crime such as this, you know? Biostains, swabbed miscellaneous items, trace material on the floor mat from Brian Koberger's vehicle. Biosuspected biostain, swabbed miscellaneous items, seatbelt from the suspect vehicle. Once again, look at all the date that seatbelt was looked into by lab staff, where it was taken, and when it was returned back to the evidence locker. I'm sure this was not the original chain of custody. This was a typed out version for it. Usually it's handwritten, but, you know, or it's put in a computer where it's not manipulated. And that's another thing. Nobody manipulates government documents, photos, videos, or any of that stuff. Only in the movies and only on YouTube. So if you're screaming that things are manipulated or it's easy to change dates and times and all this stuff, when was the last time you worked in a lab? When was the last time that you actually saw that happen? Because without dates and receipts, it didn't happen. You can scream it all you want. People will believe it because that's more believable than believing that these people actually did their jobs, and they did it thoroughly. Black gloves from the desk chair, room K, suspect's parents' home. So, those of you in the chat, I'm asking you, and I hope that you respond. Do you believe that this is a thorough chain of custody forms on each of the evidence that were mentioned in the receipts? Does this sound thorough to you? Or do you believe that these sheets can be manipulated? Do you believe that film and video and all that stuff can be manipulated? Just because you can do it on an iPhone doesn't mean that necessarily everybody in a government specter is able to do that without getting caught. Just because AI is around doesn't mean that you still cannot. If you're going to use this evidence in court, you don't think there's professionals that can tell the difference between AI and the real deal? I hope you answered my question. I know I was talking a lot after the question, but do you believe that this is a thorough examination of the evidence in which they were talking about with the evidence received? The black glove from the closet shelf, room K, suspect parents' home. Like I said, you look at this stuff enough, you start to memorize names. Black glove from the closet shelf, room K, suspect parents' home. I mean, very thorough. Very thorough. You know, two pair of gloves and knit hat from the top of the dryer room in suspect's parents' house. Swabbed miscellaneous items, Hyundai key, fob removed from the suspect car key ring. Once again, all these people doing their job. So when you claim that it was a frame job or it was a conspiracy to frame him and he's innocent, you're basically shitting on all these people's jobs who do this for a living every day, trying to find justice and trying to find suspects for a crime that's unsolved at the point of their looking at this evidence. Ellie is not good at planting evidence. One of my local jurisdiction PDs routinely planted evidence for a while until we caught them. It was all on body cam. I wouldn't think so either. As good as things are these days as far as technology, it's easier to find it than to get rid of it. So to sit there and say that it's easy to get rid of, it'd be hard to get rid of something that has been manipulated. This is a swab of the right fingernail clippings from Madison Mogan. This is the swab of gas and brake pedal removed from the suspect car. Started in March, ended in the middle of April. That's a lot of time. A lot of time. A lot of time. So let's keep going. FBI number 21, swap of the gear shift. 70 swab for lab comparison or submission. This started in March, ended in April. FBI swab, the seatbelt buckle, same thing. You know, it's interesting. It's interesting that this is monotonous to do, but at the same time, isn't this what everybody's been screaming for? Show us evidence. Show us how he could have done this. Well, this is the investigative tactic of it. 28 swabs, number 28 swabs of gas and trunk release. Swab of radio controls. Swabs of stains on objects in west bedroom and floor 2. Markers T and U. Because that's what people have been screaming, right? We don't want anything but the truth. We're just looking for the truth. Well, here's the truth. It's hard to get rid of manipulated digital evidence because access to metadata, so anything manipulated people know. The only thing one can try is to stealthily do it on body cam. Isn't ISP one of the better labs in the country? That's what I've heard. Can't wait until we get the phone data. That'll be awesome too. So this is thorough as hell, man. This is the evidence everybody's been screaming they want. How did they get the Koberger? Well, this is how they were looking for evidence to tie him to the murders. Swab on the stain of the inner edge of the east bedroom door on floor number 3, marker X. DNA extracts from items 125.1, 125.2, and 126. Okay, manual intake was required due to sequence issue with 100 plus items. So he manually intaked all that stuff because of the sequence issue. Elimination prints from redacted. Left-hand nail clippings. Let me ask you guys in chat, because I have a lot of questions. I have questions, and what better way to get answers than to ask my own chat, right? Do you believe that the suspect, if there was one, supposedly there was a suspect before Brian, once they leveled off on him and started on Brian, do you believe that they dropped the ball on that? Or do you believe that they didn't find enough evidence? As I said, they eliminated him as a suspect, even though in the beginning, who could have primarily been a suspect, but they didn't have enough to have probable cause. Do you believe that that's what happened, or do you believe that they just got tunnel vision, as others believe? Tell me what you think. Do you believe that they got tunnel vision on Brian, or do you believe that they just, once they found out about the Elantra and everything else, that other guy didn't have an Elantra? If he didn't have an Elantra, then that would have said, okay, well, chances are this isn't the guy, because this guy is circling around that house a bunch of times, and we're seeing him all over town on all these cameras. Swab of the left fingernail clippings from Madison Mogan. So here's another thing. But 12, there was other people's DNA under her fingernails. How can you overlook that? How can you not see that there could have been somebody else? Think about how much DNA is under your own fingernails of everywhere you've been today. I've been to the grocery store. I've shaken people's hands. I've done all kinds of things. When I did laundry. All kinds of things. Do you believe that that DNA found under her fingernails was actual evidence, or that was evidence that was at one point a part of the puzzle, but they chose to go in another direction because that unknown DNA was not found anywhere else in the home? So if it was not found anywhere else in the home, then that would have meant that that person was only with Maddie long enough for her to get his DNA under her fingernails. Now, if that person's DNA was found on a railing, if it was found in Xana's room, if it was found on a slider, if it was found anywhere that they found DNA, then we might have an argument. But the fact that if his DNA was only found under her fingernails, it's a moot point. It's almost like saying, well, we found that person's DNA at the frat house. Okay. Or we found this person's DNA at the grub truck. You notice they didn't swab anybody at the grub truck? They didn't swab the credit card reader. You know why? There was no reason to. That crime did not happen there. And those two girls were still alive at that point. So that was not a crime scene. You get what I'm saying? Well, let's continue on. So that's enough of the fingernail stuff for Maddie's fingernails. Here's the turn signal assembly removed from suspect vehicle by ISP, Detective Talbot. And there you have it. This one was started on May 10th and ended in May 31st. So these look later date. So this is probably the discovery that at a particular point she was saying that she was still waiting on. Thank y'all for that. Thank y'all for that. Because I agree with that wholeheartedly. But there's people that refuse to believe otherwise. And that's okay. Yeah. Just like we were fixated on that jacket at the or fire hydrant. This with the gear shift knob and the boot removed from the suspect vehicle. Once again, all the chain of custody. And this is the pink blanket with the red hearts, with tested presumptive positive for proteins using Blue Star. Area that luminous is indicated with a sample with a Sharpie. Please test for blood. Just with the bedding that's staying near the top left corner, staying near the top right corner. The green and pink jacket with tested presumptive positive for proteins, which luminous using Blue Star. Area which luminous was front zipper. Please test for blood. DNA extract from item 132.1. 2 exemplars. 3 exemplars. Fingerprints. More fingerprints. Major case prints of DNA blood card from the autopsy. Right hand nail clipping. Swab of the right fingernail clippings from Kaylee Gonsalves. And that's another thing. If it would have been another person killing them, don't you think that if Maddie had this person's fingernail DNA under her fingernails, Kaylee wouldn't have had the same person's DNA under hers? If this was the killer? But you don't think that far. You just leave it as you don't believe it because it doesn't make sense to you. That's for a lot of people. It doesn't make sense to them. They went on that a long time. That was the killer's DNA that they found under Maddie's fingernails. Okay, but they never found it anywhere else. I'm not trying to bore y'all. Like I said, I wanted to get on here and go through these documents, so I thought, why not go live, see if anybody else wants to hang out. So here's a swab of the left fingernail clippings from Kaylee Gonsalves. Swabs from redacted, DNA swab from the redacted, DNA swab from redacted, DNA extracts from items 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. DNA extracts from 3, 4, 5, 6, 1.17, 1, 8, 9, 1, 10, 1, 11, 12, 1, 13, 1, 14, 15, 1, 16, 1, 17, 18, and 19. Digital images for comparison. Evidence storage meridian, final disposition, foray. DNA extract from item 1.1. Blood swab from above stairwell. Blood swab from upper floor banister. Crime print from victim Ethan Chapin from the autopsy. Major crime print for victim Xana Kernodle from the autopsy. Major crime prints for victim Madison Mogan from the autopsy. Major crime prints for victim Kaylee Gonsalves from the autopsy. DNA swab of possible finger, hand, and face marks from outside of south kitchen window. Submitted swab of face mark on outside of south kitchen window. So if they're going this extent to look at a face mark on the outside of the south kitchen window, which we saw was an actual face look in the window like that, and not the one that looked like Xana's, but the face impression that was left behind, you can bet that they were going hardcore with all the other stuff. Not because they were fixated on this crime, but because this is their job to be the best at it. Submitted swab of hand marks on the outside of the south kitchen window. Submitted swab of finger mark on the outside of the south kitchen window. Swab of blood collected from F2 bedroom floor. Stain swab from bottom handrail stair between floor 1 and floor 2. Swab the stains on top edge of the half wall, floor number 2. Submitted swab of stain on edge of half wall. Submitted swab of stain on top of half wall. Latent lift card taken from exterior of south kitchen window. Cigarette butt found bottom of entryway stair next to where the subject's right foot was. Cigarette butt found in the right corner where walkway meets the bottom stair. DNA extracts from items 33 and 34. DNA extracts from item 23, 24, 29.1, 29.2, 29.3, 30, and 31.1. So you don't believe that they found unknown DNA in the place? You know, you don't believe that they found unknown DNA in the place. Because there's only so much that you can link up to people. There were so many people in and out of that home. I'm sure that they were fixated on the DNA that matched to the inner circle. And obviously, if they found duplicates on some things, I'm sure that they would look at that. Submitted swab from entry hallway wall. Submitted swab from kitchen wall. Blood swab. Another blood swab. Blood swab taken from the F3 bedroom floor. A glove. The swab is staying on palm side under the pinky finger. Swab is staying on the ring finger. Swabs of inside the black polar penguin glove. Buccal swab from so-and-so. Another buccal swab. Buccal swab from an unknown person because it's been redacted. A DNA swab. A buccal swab. A swab from so-and-so. A buccal swab from an unknown, redacted person. 2 swabs from redacted. A buccal swab from unknown. DNA blood card collected from the autopsy. Buccal swab from this person. And then DNA extracts from all these numbers. The lift from the kitchen window. And the second lift from the kitchen window. Third lift from the kitchen window. Lift from the kitchen sliding glass door. The lift from the front door lock. Buccal swab from another buccal swab. Another buccal swab. Right nail clipping from the autopsy. Swab of right fingernail clipping from Ethan Chapin. Another buccal swab. Another buccal swab. Another buccal swab. Another buccal swab. So you're asking, who are these people that are buccal swabbing? Were they potential suspects? I'm sure they were individuals that were being ruled out from the crime. Hey, Dina. Buccal swab from empty beer can found on the stairs. Swab of the lid area of the beer can from the stairs. Backpack found in the living room that was full of beer cans. Please also test for DNA. There's also gum with wrappers. Swab of handle loop. Swabs of shoulder strap. Swabs of the right shoulder strap. Swabs of fabric zipper pulls. So of all the DNA in that car, they didn't find DNA from the father. Where was his DNA at? You know, they did drive back a long distance together. So where was his DNA? Empty beer can found on the vanity. Swab of lid areas on beer can. Number 1 from the vanity. Latent print processing item. Second empty beer can found on the vanity. Swab of lid areas on beer can. Number 2 from the vanity. Left nail clipping from the autopsy. Swab of left fingernail clipping from Ethan Chapin. DNA cutting from items 57 through 69.1. Blue powder found on desk in the bedroom. Unmeasured. This is how an investigation is done, y'all. You actually put stuff to the lab and it's tested. A blood swab from the north wall stairway already tested positive for blood. So you test something, it tests positive for blood, you swab it, you close it up, you seal it, mark it as evidence, chain of custody, and you send it to the lab. And then there you go. It isn't done the way people think it's done. They think that you get the evidence, you put a tag on every little thing that's evidence. They wouldn't have put tags of evidence on the damn sheath. They wouldn't have put a tag next to the sheath and photographed it on the bed. It's already evidence. It's known evidence of the crime scene based on the fact that they were stabbed with a knife. A fixed-bladed knife at that. So it was a large knife, which by process of elimination, the knife sheath would have been attributed to that K-bar. You know? So there we go. A blood swab from half wall, already positive for blood. So blood swab from second floor study table, already tested positive for blood. You know, guys, I don't want any fighting in the chat. I'm not taking anybody's side, so y'all can handle y'all's own stuff off the channel. Please don't be rude to anybody in the chat. I want people to feel comfortable to be able to come into this chat, not to keep people away. This is not a monopolized chat. I'm trying to grow my chat, not diminish it. And if people see fighting or anything such that, they're not going to want to show up. So y'all have y'all's issues, y'all deal with them somewhere else. Blood swab from the second floor outside the bedroom door, already tested positive for blood. Blood swab from the smear on the living room table, already tested positive for blood. The blood swab from edge of third floor door, already tested positive for blood. Blood swab from floor stain inside the doorway, west bedroom marker R, already tested positive for blood. FBI marker number 4, 2 band-aids from redacted individual out of Pennsylvania. The cutting from 1 band-aid from redacted individual. DNA blood card from the autopsy. Evidence number 11, straw from redacted. This is a lot. Bio suspected biostain. The swab of black straw from evidence number 11. Redacted. FBI number 17, 2 pink earplugs from redacted. Swab of 2 pink earplugs from redacted. And another thing I'd like to see is y'all have a conversation about what I'm going over rather than, what, you have going on elsewhere. Like, I mean, I'm presenting this. People have always wanted to see this, whether you've seen it already, whether you've seen it 100 times. I'd appreciate it if you gave some insight on what I'm talking about. Because, I mean, like I said, I appreciate everybody in the chat, but I want people to feel comfortable enough to come into the chat. You know what I mean? And if they don't feel comfortable, well, ain't nobody needing any kind of bouncer stuff going on. You know what I mean? Okay, so like I said, people come in, they leave, they come out, whatever. And you might not like what I feel about this, but you know what? Like I said, I'm trying to build the chat where people can come in here and have a conversation instead of just the same old 4 people showing up talking about random stuff. And if that rubs you the wrong way, I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. I want more than 9 people to be watching right now. And if they see people fighting, why would they want to come in here? Like I said, y'all have issues with each other. Y'all take care of it somewhere else. My chat's not the place for it. Never been, and it never will be. Okay? Thank you. We don't need bullies in here. Cutting from lollipop stick 2 from number 17. FBI number 24, nail clippers from redacted. FBI number 26, earplugs from redacted. FBI number 34, used napkins from redacted. I mean, this is the time to ask questions. This is the time for me to slow down. This is the time to give your input on what I'm talking about. give an input on what you believe as far as the evidence that I'm going over. Because people never do that. They, you know what I'm saying? It's like some of y'all do. Some of y'all do. Y'all really feed into the conversation, but some people do not. They come in here and they misguide the chat for other purposes. And you know what? I'm really sick of it. I've gotten rid of people for that same reason that other people are doing in the chat, and it's not fair to everybody. I'm not calling anybody out specifically. I'm not trying to single anybody out. I'm just saying that, you know what, I'm going over this. You don't want to hear about it. You don't want to talk about this. Then go to Discord or wherever the hell you want to go and go have your conversations. Because that's what the title says. And people that actually do come in here to listen to this stuff, they shouldn't have to hear and be distracted by everything else. Well, regardless of how you feel about that, I don't really approve of that as well, Heather, but you know what? This isn't the place for it. This isn't the platform to discuss that. You know what I mean? Y'all talk about it in Discord, so y'all can go talk about it over there. I'm trying to present this for people that actually want to see this and actually want to hear about it. And if, you know, that's just my thought on it. FBI number 36, flossers from Pennsylvania. The cutting from one flosser, the redacted. And like I said, this is not the most interesting stuff, but I'm not going to skim through this because I decided to get on here to look at these documents and give people the opportunity to do the same thing. If it's boring to you, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't write these, you know? If people connect me to that, they connect me to that. I don't need a bodyguard. You know what I mean? I don't need a bodyguard. You know? I can handle my own. I don't need a bodyguard. Like I said, what I say is what I mean, and what I mean is what I say. And if they connect me to Nina, so be it. If they know the truth and who I am and what I'm about, then it shouldn't matter. I'm going to continue the show with or without Nina. Obviously, that drama is more important, so go discuss it in Discord if you must. Or go discuss it text message wise. This isn't a forum for it. That's all I'm saying. FBI number 38, Dunkin' Donut Cup and Lid from Redacted. FBI number 41, Straw from Redacted. Schwab from Orange Straw, number 41, Redacted. So the right hand nail clippings from the autopsy. And it continues on to the right fingernail clippings from Xana Kernodle. And like I said, these are very thoroughly done. And it's awesome to see that they did go to the thoroughness of having to do this, because they could have just done a couple tests and been done with it. But as this case has always talked about a fair trial. They always wanted a fair trial. Well, that fair trial never came, but the fairness did. And that's what I believe that should be taken from this case at all costs, you know, because it was fair. It was fair by the investigative process. As what I'm looking here, it wasn't one of the rushed investigations like I've seen in other cases. You know what I mean? And so I want to present that because So many times the police has been slammed as if they did the investigation. They gathered the detectives, the investigators, the forensic part, you know, each level of the police department who had a specialized part in this gathered the evidence. And that's what they did. They gathered it and sent it to the lab, and the lab ran the test. Never do you hear the lab got it wrong. You hear the police got it wrong. There was contamination. There was a cleanup. There was this. There was that. There was this on the counter. It was cleaned up. You don't think professionals are able to tell that there was a cleanup if there was indeed one? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So that is really something being said there, that these individuals released the chain of custody reforms, especially like FBI number 146 or 46, lollipop stick from obviously someone in Blakesley, Pennsylvania. And I just wonder if this information was taken from the Dunkin' cup and the lids and stuff were taken from the trash, or these were in the room, or the popsicle sticks were in the trash. Were these easy access points to swab for DNA? You get what I'm saying? Like, if you could compare these DNA swabs to the DNA swab on the knife sheath, then you could get confirmation that you had your guy. And these are objects that obviously they were taking to do testing on. It's so one-dimensional when you hear this case being presented by other entities. Sometimes it's so one-dimensional that they gathered the evidence, they swabbed it, and they flew it back to Idaho, and they went through it, and they found us. Where in reality, that's not what happened at all, because this is showing you that it went to the lab, and all these individuals had their hands in it. Meaning that they were the ones that were trying to find out the truth. As long as it's a whole process. It's a team process. So if you're sticking to one part of the team failed you, but the rest of the team excelled, what was the end result? Do you focus on the failure, or do you focus on the end result, which was for every failed attempt at what you believe was wrong, the rest of the team picked it up and got the best out of their evidence to get the man to plead guilty for 4 murders and a burglary? That's how I would look at it. And I've always said, the police might have got some stuff wrong. The detective might have got some stuff wrong. Human error. The lab people, they might have got some stuff wrong, but not so much that it would have derailed the investigation. The prosecution, the defense, people make mistakes. I look at documents every day that when I talk to the witnesses, when I do those interviews, right after the probable cause affidavit comes through my desk and I have the person in front of me, I'm asking them questions and they say, well, that's not how it was happening at all. That's not what went down at all. That's not what happened. I didn't say that. I didn't do that. But that's what but that's what is written down. So this is what I have to take because it was written as a probable cause for this person being suspected of this criminal act. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, the Q-tip sample, that would be disgusting. That would be disgusting. But I wonder if wax really does have a lot of DNA in it. There were lifts from item 66 8 lifts from item 68 and 4 lifts from item 69. And this is the forensic biology report. We're on to something else finally. These are the case names. The date of the evidence accepted, 11/16, which was 3 days after the crime, which showed 11/13/22. The evidence description was the item, the K-bar knife sheath, the swab of the front strap, the swab of edges on handle portion, the swab of edges on blade portion, swab of stains on the back. So let me make this a little bigger so you can see it. Because it's always infuriating to me when I'm watching something and you can't read what's being shown to you. You know? So this says, results from presumptive chemical tests performed on item 1 indicated the presence of blood. Item 1 was swabbed for DNA collection. Trace evidence was collected from item 1, but was not examined at this time. Known reference samples from Madison Mogan, Dana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Kayla Gonsalves are required for DNA comparison. Please contact the laboratory regarding the status of these known reference samples. A known reference sample from any developed suspect is required for DNA comparison. Please contact the laboratory regarding the status of this known reference sample. So there's the disposition of the evidence. And it tells you who the people are and where they were left in custody of. The remarks were the description, conclusions, and interpretation stated above apply to the sample as received. I declare under the penalty of perjury pursuant to the law of the state of Idaho that the foregoing is true and correct. You see this part right here? That's why people aren't going to lie or fabricate evidence. That's why they're not going to plant stuff. That's why they're not going to that's why they're not going to mess with their careers, because by the penalty of perjury, you can go to jail and possibly prison yourself for falsifying documents. So this is how the knife sheath, the K-bar knife sheath, was packaged. It was sealed with evidence tape. It was initialed. It was packaged in a brown paper bag. It was labeled knife sheath with the evidence case number. And it says, let me make this a little bigger because I want y'all to be able to see this. Because I don't want to be reading something and y'all are like, no, that's not what it said. It says, the item opened by and examined while in the custody of forensic scientist Tina Walthall. Tan leather K-bar knife sheath, USMC, with the logo and snap button strap. On the front, it's designated as side A in the photos, belt loop, and in the sleeve as rivets. Use bright light to examine object, white residue on and near the threads, dark areas of discoloration in material, and very small red-brown stains on the back. Note, designated as side B in the photos. Tested 4 total stains on the back, all equal to 0-TOLPOS. Collected trace material onto adhesive of sticky notes, 3 on the back and 3 on the front strap. So, I want to tell you why they did this right here. Okay, and people are saying that this could be contamination. I'm no expert, okay, but I've known multitudes of lab people. And they've always told me whenever you're testing things, you have what's a controlled test, and then you break that down into a testing as you're breaking it down to the individualized item that you're testing. So the collected test means that if there's any kind of other foreign evidence, let's say the DNA from the person who ripped the sticky note, off and they happen to get some of their DNA on it, you would be able to see that on the collected test. And you could discount them as being part of the test. And you continue to work that way until you get to the direct object of what you're testing to make sure that you have the actual object that you're looking for, not everything else that could have collected itself on the sticky note. So the same holds true to the tape that they use when they lift fingerprints. As you know, tape is very adhesive, so anything in the air can cling to it, even if it's not seen by the human eye. So think about that. Whenever you're reading stuff like this, you have to understand that even though it was collected on the adhesive of sticky notes, they didn't just use the testing off the sticky note at the end result. They do collective and on down the line. So any extra DNA or fibers or anything that were found, they would have known that they were not relevant to what they were looking for. And it says use one swab to swab front strap, light gray transfer to the swab, consumptive. Use one swab to swab edges of the handle portion, light brown transfer to the swab, consumptive. Avoided red-brown stain, so they didn't even go into the red-brown stains like people think. Use one swab to swab edges on the blade portion, light brown transfer to swab, consumptive. Use two swabs to swab 0-20L POS staining on back. Light red-brown transfer concentrated on tips. Consumptive, all stains collected. Note, item left in the custody of FS T. Walthall pending latent print analysis. The O-TOL was positive. Centimeter 1.1 swab of the front strap. The task of the test. The date of the analysis was 11/17/2022. The content description notes. Whole swab cut to DNA. Remaining swab stick pack in the main envelope. Retained from the source, yes, and Q. And the same thing for the edges of the handle portion. So I've heard people wonder why 11/17 and why not 11/13. Think about that a little bit. If 11/17 was the date in which they tested this, and they found it on 11/13, they don't rush. They weren't going to be like, okay, we found this knife sheath. We know it's based on the suspect, so therefore let's rush it over today. There has to be a lot of different forms filled out. There has to be probable cause. There has to be all that stuff put in place. So it could have taken 4 days for all that to be handled within the logistics of the investigation. That was in tune the reason why 11/17/22 would have been the actual date that that knife sheath was transported. No other reason. They weren't trying to hide it. They weren't trying to contaminate it. Because I'm sure of all the things that were highly protected, that was probably one of them. Okay, this was done by Stephanie Wilt. The whole swab cut to DNA, remaining swab stick pack and main envelope. And it continues on as stains on the back. The stain portion of both swabs cut to DNA, totaling -1 swab, no staining left on the swabs, remaining swab packed in the main envelope. And it was retained, yes. And it tells you whatever this means. I'm not a scientist, so I don't have a clue what that means. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I do. But basically, here is, should I do a stripper kind of sound? Let me see here. Let's see if there's kind of stripper music here. Because if there is, I want to. Let's see, The Rock, night driving, daydreaming, beating the dust. Let's see if this one does it. I need to delete this one. Hold on a second. Because the knife sheath has been more popular than anything talked about ever. Well, let's see if it has its. Let's give it its own music. But I just told you, it's with the area swab. It tells you the date and who signed it. I can turn that down. That's getting annoying. So that tells you the person who swabbed us. And these are the areas swabbed. Item 1.2, edges only. So there were the edges that were swabbed. And this is the areas swabbed. Item 1.3, note the edge only. So these are the numbers in the descriptions of the chain of custody that we just went through. So if you go back and you see these numbers, that's why they numbered these things by numbers. So that you can know what area, what number matches what swabbing. That way you don't have to sit there and guess. And this is the side B, which would be the second side of the sheath. And this is where the positive test came about, on the top portion of the sheath. And this also tested positive for blood. Right here. This tested positive for blood. Because that's what we just read. And this tested positive for blood. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 areas on the back of the knife sheath. Could it have been victim blood? Could it have been Koberger's blood? I'm sure eventually we'll know. Because of the DNA that's found in the blood. And that's why they swabbed so many people. So that when they look for the DNA in the blood, they're able to identify whose freaking blood that was. And they're at the back of the knife sheath. The only reason I could contend that this looks really brand new would be that he didn't use it until the murders. He probably had the knife out of this more than the sheath. He probably messed with the sheath only when he put the knife in. When he put the knife back in. So of course it would have looked almost brand new. I don't quite remember when he bought this. I think it was before he left home, right? No, would have been like, if in the chat y'all can remember when that date was that he bought this from Amazon. Not received it, but when he received it, please type that in the chat. Because I don't remember all those little bit of information. I should, but I don't. And this is trace material collected. These little bitty areas right here. And there's her initial, there's the date, item 1, and there's the case number. So you still don't believe that this knife sheath gave away the person who did the quadruple murders. I don't believe you'll ever believe it. And this is trace material collected. Same date, same initials, same case number. I'm not going to presume that I know what this is. I talked about this earlier in one of my lives. Thank you for that. March 22. Thank you. So from March 22 to October 22, November 22, my bad, November 22, wouldn't have been a long time. This knife sheath wouldn't have been all damaged up. And this looked like the expensive one, not the cheap one that is of darker color. Because I've looked them up on Amazon. The lighter the tan the sheath is, the more expensive it is. The darker the sheath, it's imitation leather. So this looks like to be the real deal kind of stuff. But as I spoke on this morning, I stated that this looked like a fiber or even a hair. So um, I don't really know if it is either or, but it's interesting to say the least. Hey, Mountain Mama, long time no see. I hope you're doing good. So that is obviously something that's curled up right there. Could it be something, or could it be something that they found that had trace material on it? So trace material means that it was traced to either the victim or the perpetrator. And I went over this morning. It says trace material collected. There it is right there once again on the outside of the sheath and on the interior of the sheath. And I want you to know that if they would have photographed this or even shown it on the video on the police cam, you do remember it was found under Maddie's leg. You remember that, right? So if there was blood on her leg and the sheath was partially hanging out, you wouldn't be able to see all this stuff anyways. So how could that suffice your curiosity whether this is real or whether this is not? And there's the knife sheath. And this tells you the biology of it. It's positive and negative control checked at the time of testing. Yes. Documentation using a sketch or photograph with appropriate elements. Yes. Appropriate examination test. Yes. Appropriate sample selection. Yes. Report addresses, all items received and tests performed. Yes. Conclusions are supported by results and data. Yes. Appropriate matrix fields, including foresight, completed. Yes. Dates of analysis noted. Yes. The kit, regent, lot numbers, and expiration date noted. Yes. Reason for rejecting results not applicable. Chain of custody is complete and reflects transfers made. Yes. Review acceptance of work performed by another analyst documented. Not applicable. Appropriate samples and or lysites forwarded for correct DNA analysis type. Yes. Packaging and item types are created items as described in notes. Yes. Permanent retention marked appropriately. Yes. Reported disposition reflects notes and chain of custody. Yes. Reference sample or consumption request documented. Yes. IKTS updated for SAECK analysis. Not applicable. Photograph of sperm or hair included. Not applicable. Batch review completion documented. Not applicable. It's a reported description of item consistent with the description provided by the submitting agency. Yes. Select the priority status for the DNA assignment 1. Examination, documentation, and report reviewed for completeness and clerical errors. Yes. Attachments are associated with the correct case or the item. Yes. Attachments are free of obliterations, write-overs, and corrections are dated and initiated. Yes. Items forwarded for DNA marked as retained and correct item source assigned. Yes. And DNA extract created and scanned to appropriate location. Yes. Jade Miller was a forensic scientist. And here's the forensic latent print examination report. We know the victims, we know the date of the crime, and we know the date of the evidence accepted was 11/16/2022. This is the K-bar leather knife sheath. Item 1 was processed for latent print. Item 1, no latent prints were observed or developed. Disposition of evidence, item 1 will be returned to the submitting agency. So once again, there was no latent prints observed or developed on that knife sheath. 11/19/2022. And this is for the knife sheath as well. And kind of like that other form, it tells you the agency, the description, the task, the test, the value, and the latent print processing. So this says that on 11/17/2022, item 1, which was leather, was examined by Stephanie Wilt while in my custody. The presumptive blood testing, which was positive, and samples for biology were collected by F.S. Wilt. Trace samples were collected on post-it notes and placed in a manila envelope that was then repackaged with item 1. The method 1 was visual. Result 1, NDP. And then it goes on to some biological stuff, which I have no idea what any of it means. So here is the packaging that they're talking about. And we just talked about chain of custody. So everything that we talked about chain of custody has, I'm pretty certain, a bag with all the stuff fitted just like this. Or if it's different, it has different tags on it. So, damn, I've been going 2 hours on this. So that says 11/16/2022. Obviously, we know this number as the case number by now. We know that this is the evidence tape that helps to know somebody breaks into it and the tape is broken, because you can't just put a new piece of tape on there, because there's usually initials on this tape, and this is filled out. So this is probably right before they filled everything out. And here are the pictures that I showed last night. As you can see, that knife sheath looks used. I mean, doesn't look stiff. Like, you know how a baseball glove, when you first buy it, it looks kind of stiff and you can see the leather is shinier. Excuse me. Then when you sweat on it, or when you play in it for a while, you break it in. Because I believe, the leather, it gets wet. It has, in this case, it has blood on it. So would this have looked the same way under Maddie's leg? Of course not. Would they have cleaned it up to be able to examine it? That is a hell yes. There's no way that they found this knife sheath just like this in this pristine condition. It would have looked totally different under her leg with blood on it. I can tell you that these little areas right here are presumed to be blood, and it tested positive on the sides of the knife sheaths as well, as you saw in the documentation earlier. And this is a yes/no type of scenario. This is a review checklist. Basically, did you do all this stuff? Administratively, we're reviewing that you did everything to protocol. And they must fill one of these out, I'm sure, for every bit of evidence that requires it. And this is the inside of the house with the fingernail clippings from all the victims. So these would have been examined as well. They would have probably been placed in plastic containers or some kind of sealed container that would not allow air or any other things to contaminate them. It says, and the swab from item 4, all these numbers and the swab from item 4 indicated the presence of blood. The results from the presumptive chemical test for the presence of blood were negative on the debris from item 4. So who was item 4? Item 4 was the swab and debris from F3 bedroom floor. So that's what item 4 was. So it was negative on the debris from item 4. So there was no presence of blood on item 4. The disposition of evidence, item 6.1, 7.1, 13.1, 15.1, 16.1, and the swab from item 4 and the portion of item 3.9.1, 10.1, 12.1 were forwarded to the DNA analysis. Results will follow in a separate report. All remaining items and the empty packaging for item 4, 6.1, 7.1, 13.1, 15.1, and 16.1 have been returned to the main laboratory evidence vault pending DNA analysis. And then it declares under perjury by the state of Idaho that everything that is written in here is true and correct. And this is the biology analysis notes that were taken on all this evidence. How it was sealed. So what was in there? So glass and paper contingent, 5 fingernail clippings, red-brown staining on all nails. Observations were red-brown staining on all nails. Tested 1 total stain. It looks like positive. Used 1 swab to swab nail clipping. Red-brown transfer to swab. Positive consumptive, which was positive. And it was retained. And this was from Xana. These were fingernail clippings from Xana. So they were positive for blood. Her fingernails were positive for blood. Or at least one of them was. The right fingernail clipping is from Maddie Mogan. It says her clipping on all nails and light pink stain on exterior largest clipping. Tested 1 total stain, which was positive. Used 1 swab on swab nail clippings. Red-brown transfer to swab note. Avoided light pink stain and broke 1 nail during swabbing. It was positive for 0 minus TOL. So the right fingernail clipping from Maddie Mogan. Stain portion cut to DNA. Remaining swab pack in main envelope. So this goes on, and I think this is a good place to stop. This is page 248. So, I think this is a good place to stop. Do you guys have any questions over what I have went over in the last 2 hours? Do you have any questions on any of the procedures that were done that I can possibly answer? Like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a forensic pathologist or anything like that, but I can answer it to the best of my ability. I'm not going to say I don't know, but I can answer it to the best of my ability. Is there any questions in the chat? And once again, I wasn't trying to go off on anybody in the chat. I'm glad that people like to come in here to the chat. But one thing that irks me, and I know there's not a lot of discussion to be made on the documents because there's a lot of information. But one thing I've heard for 3 years is people want certain proof. They want certain evidence. They want certain things to be shown. And it never seems to be the stuff that they want shown, which is understandable. Many people have different things they want to see. But I want to know, as a community, if this is answering your questions, that this was indeed a thorough investigation and it wasn't as put together as many people have concluded, that this examination of evidence was just thrown together and they had no idea what they were doing because they were young cops or whatever. We've all wanted the answers. And that's why I go live, and that's why I even do these lives. And I've let a lot of things slide in my chat, that maybe why my chats aren't as big as they should be, or maybe my shit is boring. Who the hell knows? But one thing I've always stood by, and I always stand by it, whether you got a wrench or not, is you will respect other chatters, whether you agree with their stance or disagree. If they are not being rude to chat or myself or any panel guest, that is a rule from day one. They should not be bullied, attacked, or anything. If you have some kind of issue with that person, deal with it outside the chat. This is not a forum for any kind of bullying whatsoever. And I mean that. So I understand people have bad days and they have feelings towards certain things that have affected them. But we are not a mob. Each of us is an adult, and I'm sure each of us has the capability to stand up for ourselves against our wrongdoers. And I've seen a lot of people do it. Not necessarily in the chat, but in Discord. So it's been dealt with. It needs to drop. Let me see here. Here's a comment. Thank you for that, Layla. I always like seeing that little puppy on your avatar. Is that your real dog? If it is, it's adorable. She or he is adorable. 12 gauge. I heard a creator say this morning, by her looking and reading this, that the lab never swabbed the snap of the sheets, but listening to you, that doesn't seem correct. No, they swabbed in the areas where the numbers were listed, was my understanding. And in the pictures, they were able to label what areas that they swabbed. In the first picture that I showed, there was a swab on the buckle. Let me see if I can go back to that picture to show exactly what I'm talking about. So I was on page 247. See, I already forgot. Yeah, we'll start with 247. Let me go back to that to show you. Because that is interesting when people misinterpret what they're reading. And it happens, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. See this picture right here will show you that the button snap was swabbed. Right here. This area was swabbed. All this. See how the purple is all around there? Around the button snap, around up here. This was swabbed because it was given a number 1.1. And then it was 1.2, which was given a different color. This area was swabbed with a different number. Because you have to differentiate with these numbers what certain portions are different. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Layla? Because it shows right there that the button snap was swapped. Yeah, that little puppy's adorable. So I hope that makes sense to you. Just like these others, it continues on and it even it color coordinate the areas that were swabbed, gives them a number, and she said the edge only. So they didn't swab any of these buttons. None of that was important. They did the backside with different, and they even tell you the positive for blood. That's what 0 minus T0L is positive for blood. As in the document stated, that's what that means. And the area swab 1.4, individual stains swabbed. So the individual stains were swabbed right here as well. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. And I believe that one of the reasons that a lot of creators don't want to go through these 2,300 or so documents, it's a lot of documents. But if you're going to present something, why not give it to your audience from the beginning? So they're able to understand it, not just picking out the high point. I could have just stuck to the sheath and they're going to show the interior cushion of the vehicle. They're going to show all that coming up because that's what the receipts at the very beginning, that's what all that was about. The next portion, when they identified the chain of custody on those items and the lab results of those items, now we're getting to the picture portion that's going to show exactly what they were looking at on these other chain of custodies on the receipts. So it goes in sequence whenever you're doing an investigation. You just can't jump around and pick portions that you want to talk about because people are going to be lost. It's how they got to that point. And I believe that that's part of the problem is there's a lot of people that are lost is how some of this stuff happens. How did they get to this? How did they say they didn't find blood, but the seat cushion has blood underneath it, stained of a brownish thing. And I'm going to show that probably either tomorrow or later on this week. I mean, these lives take a lot out of me. But you don't have to worry about the drama. It's not going to happen in this channel, Mountain Mama. I want to grow this chat where there's people that can express their opinion openly without feeling bullied, without getting attacked, but without, if I'm calling somebody an idiot, that's one thing. But for somebody in chat to be calling somebody an idiot, that's totally unacceptable. I take accountability for mine. In the chat, it's just being bullies, regardless of your position. My channel has never and never will be a platform for bullying. It will never be a platform for people to voice their disrespect toward other people. I do it because I hold myself accountable. And I'm not responsible for everybody in the chat. If I never comment on something that you're going through, or you feel like somebody said something in another channel or something and I don't comment on it, most of the people that come into this chat are adults. If you can't defend yourself without mobbing up to have to go defend yourself with a mob, what kind of adult does that say you are? We are beyond the mob mentality. That is bullying in every sense of the word. Stand on your own 2 feet. I don't like people being done wrong. And I know a lot of people that have been done wrong by multitudes of people. I've been done wrong by multitudes of people. How I got into a relationship that I was lied to every step of the way. Have I once called that person out? Have I once disclosed who I even was dating? No, because I'm adult enough to deal with that situation rather than dragging that person through the mud so everybody else can jump on them. You know what I'm saying? I want you to feel comfortable to come into this community that I call 12 Gauge Investigative and be comfortable enough to listen to the chat, discuss about the topics that are going on the screen, and move on. So I hope that you hit the like button, subscribe, or the dislike if you don't. You know? I left the channel recently because the chat became out of hand. I appreciate a channel that can be informative and a drama left at the door. I've always worked hard on that. That's been my staple since day one. I don't like that. I don't enjoy that. And it's a waste of my time to go live when you're wanting to talk about everything and anything other than what's being presented. I understand the camaraderie. I get that. I understand it. But at one particular point, if you're not going to add to it, you're deducting from it. But once again, I'm not checking adults. I'm merely calling them to check themselves. And if that loses me subscribers, well, you know what? Won't be the first time. That loses me mods, same thing. I'm not going to stand for it. And I'm not going to bully people into acting right. I'm not into supervising adults. You can't change anybody when they don't see the fault in their stuff. And that's for people that hurt other people, and that's for people that hurt people who hurt other people. Two wrongs don't make a right. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I shouldn't even have to address that. It's ridiculous. But those of you that have hung on through this chat, through this live, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that you feel comfortable enough to keep coming back, because I am going to continue to read these, because I'm curious myself as to what they do pertain, because this is the biggest drop yet with actual photos of things that are evidentiary, even if they would have been, such as the car and the stuff that was found in there, that would have been circumstantial. But the knife sheath, I've always wanted to see the condition in which it was in and everything attached to it. So hopefully this puts some peace of mind that the law enforcement did not do anything wrong, that there was multitudes of individuals in the investigative process, and that the right man stood up and said that he did it. I made an announcement earlier, and I already had a taker. So this is the last thing I'm going to say. The QR code up at the left-hand side, that is for the American Heart Association. During the month of November and December, I'm gonna open it up for people to send me their QR codes, whether in Discord or whether in my email. Make sure the link works that directs it to that area, because there's food banks. There's all kinds of different entities that need our help during these holidays and beyond. So if you know of a nonprofit that is not a scammer or anything else, that's been around for a while, make sure you send a QR code to me and I will broadcast that on my lives. That way people can donate anonymously without anybody knowing who's donating, who's not. And I have one that was sent to me. I'm just trying to figure out how to set that up on StreamYard because it's not allowing me to. I will have to figure out whether I need to make a new QR code or whatever. But thank you for sending me the QR code. You know who you are. And I will definitely put that in the left-hand corner from here on out through the holidays. So if you have an organization, whether it be the Cancer Society, breast cancer awareness, anything like that, that you hope that people continue to donate to anonymously, send me those QR codes, and I'll definitely put those on my lives for people to donate, whether they're watching on replay or whether they're watching live. Well, I'm out of here because I've been on here 2 hours and 30 minutes. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. You won't hear from me again tonight, I promise. Remember to be safe out there and always watch your six. Maestro, cue that music.